Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The House Judiciary Committee is responsible for helping to ensure the rule of law. Unfortunately, the chairman of this committee ignored a bipartisan congressional subpoena directed at him. His actions have made it harder for this committee and other congressional committees to get witnesses and testimony and damage the rule of law. Now, before I ask questions of Mr. Smith, I just want to make a simple observation. How scared are Republicans of talking about the Epstein files? They're so scared that they literally are calling Jack Smith the distinguished federal prosecutor who secured multiple indictments against Donald Trump with multiple felony counts. Republicans would rather talk about the criminality of Donald Trump in trying to steal an election and trying to stop the peaceful transfer of power, and the criminality of Donald Trump in stealing classified documents, obstructing justice, than about Donald Trump's associations with Jeffrey Epstein and his pedophilia ring. I demand this committee, this chairman, and Republicans to call an immediate hearing asking why the Department of Justice is refusing to release 99% of the Epstein files and why the DOJ is violating the law right now. I have questions, Mr. Smith, for you, and thank you for being here today. My questions center on interactions or lack of interactions between the Biden administration and yourself. Did President Biden or anyone in the Biden White House ever direct you to seek retribution against anyone perceived to be Biden's political opponent?
No.
Did the Biden administration or President Biden or anyone in the White House ever write a social media post directing you to seek retribution against any particular individual?
No.
Did President Biden or anyone else in the Biden White House ever direct you to take any prosecutorial step whatsoever?
No.
Okay. Donald Trump made it clear he wanted to seek retribution against New York Attorney General Tish James. Trump relentlessly attacked her, saying, quote, she should be prosecuted and, quote, arrested and punished because she dared to hold Trump accountable for Trump's fraud in New York. Trump weaponized the Department of Justice, and the Trump DOJ opened a sham investigation into her alleged mortgage fraud. We know it's a sham investigation because they couldn't even get twice grand juries to secure indictments against her. When interim U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert, who Donald Trump himself appointed, spent 5 months investigating Tish James, he concluded there was not enough evidence to go forward. And what did Trump do? He fired his own U.S. attorney. Mr. Smith, did President Biden or anyone else in the Biden White House ever tell you that Donald Trump should be, quote, arrested and punished?
No.
Did President Biden or anyone else in the Biden White House ever threaten to fire you based on any action you took or did not take?
No.
Okay. Donald Trump also directed the Trump DOJ to open investigations into his own appointees who refused to do his bidding. His DOJ recently investigated Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell because Powell won't cede to Trump's bullying on interest rates. Did President Biden or anyone else in the Biden White House ever direct you to go after any Biden appointee?
No.
Okay. I just want to say a little bit about what the Republicans have brought up about these phone toll records. Do you believe the Speaker of the House is above the law?
No, I don't believe anybody should be above the
That's
law.
right. And U.S. senators are not above the law, correct?
No.
Yeah. And members of Congress are not above the law, right?
No.
Yeah, that's right, because we're not. And what Republicans are trying to argue is somehow, if you're doing an investigation, you can't do stuff to senators or members of Congress. Get out of here. We're just under a law like everybody else. And by the way, the speech and debate clause only applies to legislative acts, communications with legislative acts. Stealing a frickin' election, trying to do so, is not a legislative act. It is a crime. So I don't know what the heck they're talking about. And this is so stupid. I'm a former prosecutor. You never in an investigation go and try to get someone's toll records or phone records and then tell them, hey, dude, we're about to get your phone records. Of course you wouldn't tell them. What the Republicans are saying today is just idiotic. I am so pleased you're here on national TV telling the American people that Trump was indicted. He was indicted lawfully, and multiple grand juries secured those indictments. Thank you for your service, and history will look upon you well. I yield back.
Well, thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by recognizing the presence of 4 American heroes here today, 4 of the hundreds of officers who defended us on January 6, 2021, Michael Fanone, Aquilina Gonell, Daniel Hodges, and Harry Dunn. And I thank them for being here today. Mr. Smith, thank you for appearing before the American people. I'm glad that the committee has finally granted you the same chance to report your findings to the American people that every other special counsel investigating an American president has had. The good chairman started by saying it's all about the politics. Well, maybe for them, but for us, it's all about the rule of law and who's going to stand by the rule of law and who's going to oppose it. And Mr. Smith, you're one of America's great prosecutors. For nearly 3 decades, you worked for justice under both Republicans and Democrats. The Manhattan DA office, where you prosecuted sex crimes and domestic violence cases, the Eastern District of New York, where you prosecuted murderers, rapists, gangbangers, and other violent criminals. Leading the public integrity section at the Department of Justice, you brought prosecutions against corrupt public officials across the political spectrum. When you went to The Hague as chief prosecutor in the Kosovo trial, you prosecuted war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated against thousands of innocent victims. While others may have devoted their lives to corrupt self-enrichment, you have devoted your life to the rule of law and to public service. You've never been prosecuted for anything. You've never been convicted of anything. As far as I can tell, you've never even been the subject of a disciplinary proceeding over the course of your multi-decade career. But Donald Trump says you're a criminal and you belong in prison. He says you belong in prison, not because you did anything wrong, mind you, but because you did everything right. You pursued the facts, you followed the law, you stuck with extreme caution to every rule of professional responsibility. You had the audacity to do your job. Everybody here knows what you did wrong in Donald Trump's eyes and why he says you belong in prison. You found, and I quote from your sworn testimony before the committee, you found proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power. When asked whether you believe the evidence was enough to obtain a criminal conviction against Donald Trump at trial, you had a one-word answer: yes. When asked if Donald Trump was responsible for the violence that took place at the Capitol on January 6th, you said, our view of the evidence was that he caused it and that he exploited it and that it was foreseeable to him. You found that Trump knew he had lost the election. How? Well, his own Attorney General, William Barr, repeatedly told him so and described all of Trump's theories as BS. Trump's top campaign advisors told him he lost the election. Vice President Pence told him he lost the election. More than 60 federal, state, and court decisions, including 8 rendered by judges he appointed to the bench, rejected every outlandish election fraud and corruption claim that he made. Trump himself even privately acknowledged it, gesturing to Joe Biden on TV and saying, quote, "Can you believe I lost to that effing guy?" He knew he lost, but he threw everything into his big lie, which some people, even in this room to this day, will stand by and swear by. Well, when the big lie wasn't enough to convince officials like Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a Republican, to commit election fraud and just fine Trump 11,780 votes, when it wasn't enough to convince Trump's DOJ to, quote, just call the election corrupt and leave the rest to me and the House Republicans, when it wasn't enough to force Vice President Mike Pence to announce and then exercise lawless powers to reject Electoral College votes and use counterfeit slates to anoint Trump the winner, that's when Trump incited mass violence on January 6th. while more than 140 officers were being brutally assaulted by Trump's mob, while rioters beat them with flagpoles and sprayed them with chemical agents and crushed them in doorways, and while they chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," and chased the vice president out of the Capitol, Trump and his team worked the phones, calling not the National Guard, which was under the direct unilateral control of Donald Trump, but calling members of Congress, urging them to delay certification and to nullify the election results. Special Counsel Smith, you pursued the facts. You followed every applicable law, ethics rule, and DOJ regulation. Your decisions were reviewed by the Public Integrity Section. You acted based solely on the facts, the opposite of Donald Trump, who now has purported to take over the Department of Justice. He's in charge of the whole thing under his unitary executive theory, and he acts openly, purely based on political vendetta and motives of personal revenge, and he doesn't deny it. Our colleagues have complained about the special counsel's review of toll records, which are phone records like a phone bill, showing only the timing and duration of calls and containing no content, no substance whatsoever from the calls. But those records were lawfully subpoenaed because Donald Trump made those members of Congress relevant to the investigation. It was Trump who chose to call them to advance his criminal scheme. As you testified, Mr. Smith, if Donald Trump had chosen to call a number of Democratic senators, we would have gotten toll records for them too. I trust our colleagues get the point because America certainly gets the point. There is much Mr. Smith still can't talk about, though we know he badly wants to. His investigation developed what he calls powerful evidence that Trump stole documents containing our country's most sensitive secrets, hoarded them in the ballrooms and the bathrooms of his well-trafficked Mar-a-Lago social club. He showed them off to visitors. And then he obstructed a federal investigation by instructing his attorney to pluck out anything really bad before turning materials over to the FBI and having his staff delete incriminating security tape footage. But today, we're not going to hear a lot about that because you are gagged by an absurd judicial order rendered faithfully by Trump's most servile and sycophantic appointee to the federal bench, Judge Eileen Cannon. This order not only blocks release of Volume 2 of your report, which is unprecedented, about the classified document scam, it also gags you from discussing the report or its contents with us, with America. And so we don't know what's in it, but it must be pretty devastating because Donald Trump is desperate to keep Mr. Smith or any other DOJ official for all time from ever releasing it to Congress and to the American people. Now, Mr. Smith, if any of our colleagues foolishly choose to attack you and vilify you today, and I know that's not going to happen from some serious prosecutors over there like Mr. Knott and Mr. Schmidt, who understand what federal prosecutors do and what the rule of law means. But if anybody decides to attack you personally, they will only be revealing their own ignorance of what prosecutors do and their own indifference to what the rule of law requires in America. They will only be stroking the wounded ego of a lawless, twice impeached, convicted felon president who not only unleashed a mob against Congress and his own vice president, but is now pardoned and released into our communities hundreds of extremists, insurrectionists, and cop-beating felons who have proceeded to commit dozens more crimes against the American people since they were pardoned. Mr. Smith, I understand you are a long-distance marathon runner. I read that you're a triathlete who's done more than 100 triathlons and 9 Ironman competitions. You are in the fight for justice and the rule of law for the long distance, for the long haul, and I thank you for that. And we should all try to follow your example. America looks forward to your testimony today. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.